Welcome to Shadow the Stereotypes, where our intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. You see, there's never been a shortage of Black male role models. There's only been a lack of exposure of those role models. So the intention here is to highlight and showcase ordinary men who are doing extraordinary things. And I've got one of those men with me today. And we're going to have a conversation about one of my favorite topics. And that topic is transformation. And if you can see my shirt here, it says transforming your life from the inside out. That's my tagline. And so we're going to talk a little bit about transformation, what it is, how you do it. And so joining me today is Mr. Ralph Campbell, and he is the CEO and thought leader of Optimized Learning, LLC. And he specializes in transformation. So without further ado, let's welcome Ralph to the show. Ralph, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Well, I want to give you the opportunity to introduce Ralph. So tell us about where you're from, maybe share a little bit about growing up.
Yeah, I am from Key West, Florida. Most people don't know that. That's in the southernmost tip of the United States. So I grew up in Key West, Florida. And I'm a graduate of Morehouse College in Atlanta. So I majored in marketing and communications. I spent half of my career in the insurance business. And then when I was 24, I did my first transformational workshop, which really changed the trajectory of my life, which has me really be here today, 25 years later.
Okay. So how about married, single? It's complicated. What's
I'm dating. I have a beautiful girlfriend. I have two twin boys that are 16 years old. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. So what lights you up and gets you out of bed every morning?
What lights me up, well, my personal why, Michael, is to leave a positive mark on people's lives so that together, the difference we make for each other can never be erased. So that's what guides me. Everything that I do in a given day, who I contribute to, it comes out of that why. I did a lot of work. I admire Simon Sinek, right? He has the finding your why. And so I'm a student of Simon, and I was able to craft my why several years ago, even before his work became popular, because I believe, who we are in the world comes out of, our declaration of who we are being, and that why. Some people call it a cause, a purpose, a vision statement. For me, I call it my why.
Okay. Now, there are some people who are pessimistic about the future in general, and there are others who are optimistic about the future in general. So where would you fall on the spectrum between optimism and pessimism for the future in general?
I consider myself having an open and a growth mindset. And so coming from that place, I'm optimistic about the future. And the reason I say that is I'm an amateur historian, and I believe all leaders should be amateur historians. And what that really means is being able to look at the past and compare it to what we have today. And we have never been in a greater place in America if you compare it to the levels of poverty that we had 50 years ago, the level of unemployment that we had 50 years ago, the level of equality today versus inequality today we had 50 years ago. And I can go on and on and on. So I'm an optimist. Do we have challenges? Absolutely. Do I think we're stuck in many ways? Absolutely. Which is why I love doing what I do, because my job is to support people becoming unstuck and be able to see out of a different lens.
Yeah. I consider myself to be an irrepressible optimist. I'm so excited I can barely contain myself. So that's just my perception of the world. So we're going to be talking about transformation, and I want to begin with a little story. Back in the late 80s, I was going through a pretty dark period of my life. I'd gone through a divorce, bankruptcy, a foreclosure, a deep, deep state of depression, and I was trying to figure out how to put my life back together. And I'm at work and I'm sitting in my office and I'm reading a USA Today newspaper. And in the centerfold of the newspaper, there was this column and it said things to do for the summer or something to that effect. And at the very top, there was this huge cruise ship. And I thought, maybe that'll help. I'll take this cruise. Well, there were a lot of different little articles about different things to do. And at the very bottom of the page, there was this little 2-sentence, 3-sentence, something that said something to the effect of, are you ready to take your life on, or something like that. I mean, it was just a little blurb. It had a phone number. So I decided to call this number, and answer machine picked up. I left my number. A couple of days later, this lady calls, and she's one of these high energy, motivational, hi, how you doing, blah, blah, blah. And she says, you know, call me back. So I call this lady back, and she invited me to go to this guest event. Now, I had no idea what she was talking about. Initially, I thought it might have been some sort of multi-level marketing scam or something, but I was really looking for something to alleviate the pain that I was in. So I go to this guest event, and people there were talking about this experience they had. And they were sharing some of the lessons they learned, and they were talking about an organization called LifeSpring. I had no idea what LifeSpring was. I didn't know anything about personal growth workshops, but as I listened to some of their stories, I realized that I wanted some of that, whatever that was. And so I decided I'm going to sign up for this thing. And again, I knew nothing about it, but I just signed up for it. And I went to this thing called LifeSpring. And it literally changed my life. As a result of doing that training, number one, I gained the courage to walk away from my job and start my own company and become an entrepreneur. But even deeper than that, I tapped into a part of myself that I didn't know existed. And I began what I'll call my journey of transformation. And I believe transformation is a journey. It's not just a 3-day weekend, it's a process. But this thing called LifeSpring really catapulted me into a whole new life. And ever since then, that's been almost 30 years ago, I've been committed to my growth and transformation. And what I try to do is support others to do the same. And that's the intention of this show, because specifically I target men of color to support them, because obviously we know all the challenges that are out there regarding men of color. But again, I'm an optimist, and I believe that we all have the capacity to transform our lives. So the one thing I want to make clear is that when it comes to transformation, I think it's important to understand the science behind it. And so for those of you who are watching, you may have not heard of this word, but it's called ontology. And it can be defined as the philosophical study of being. More broadly, it studies concepts that directly relate to being, in particular, becoming, existence, reality, as well as the basic categories of being and their relation. So that's a pretty deep definition, Ralph, but give me some comments on your idea of ontology and being.
Yeah, it's a big word that's not often used, so I appreciate that. And you know, the training that you did, I was fortunate enough in 1994, 25 years ago, to do LifeSpring as well, right? And LifeSpring, the foundation is ontological. I call it ontological leadership, the study of being and the study of who we are as human beings. And, you know, for me, being an inquiry of who we are in the world, who we're being in the world, is really the pillar for many people to catapult to where they really want to go. You know, in the trainings, the premise is getting from where you are to where you want to go. It's not getting from what you're doing to where you want to go. It's not from getting from what you have to where you want to go. It's getting from where you are from a being. And I want to unpack being, because I think for many people, we use a lot of big words, but we don't use common language, Michael. And so I'm a professional coach. I'm always coaching people on unpacking language. All of my sisters have their PhDs, JD, knowledge. The no, that's not transformation. Transformation is about self-discovery. It's about awareness. And so let's unpack being for your audience. And so when we talk about being, because I use that word a lot, what I mean by being contextually, being could be feelings, could be emotions, could be thoughts, could be a thought process, attitude, mindsets, bodily sensations. And so at the core of transformation, an ontology is this way of being. Transformation is a way of being in the world. And so when I work with individuals, work with corporations, that is exactly the starting point of transforming one's life, of who I get to be from those categories.
Yeah. And so my intention here with this show is to help men of color recognize that your ontological makeup, your beingness has nothing to do with the color of your skin. It's transformational. It's your beingness. And so I think there's a hesitancy a lot of times for men of color to engage in these types of conversations. So that's why I want to kind of break it down so that there's a deeper understanding. So I appreciate you breaking down that beingness, because that's the foundation of everything.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe that. So put it in simple terms, you can teach an old dog new tricks. Men, we are not fixed. We can be transformed, but we have to commit to our own transformation in order to do that. Now, Ralph, I have come to understand that there are only two things that'll cause a person to want to change. One is pain, and the other is what I call divine discontent. Now, you mentioned that you began the process as around 24. So what was the catalyst for you to begin that journey?
You know, great question, Michael. For me, I didn't know I had the pain, right? For me, was getting what I call to a shadow question. So we'll use some new terminology, perhaps. Shadow question is a question that always runs in our background. Usually when we were really young, a negative event, a challenging event, we make up these interpretations, these stories, and it becomes our shadow question. For me, my shadow question was, I'm not enough. You know, I come from a family of 3 very, very smart women in my life. And so I was always, quote unquote, the black sheep, literally, in my mind. So my shadow question going into the training was, am I enough? And as a result of going to the training and taking a look at these beliefs I made up, right, on who I was being. Remember, I talk about being is a belief I have about myself as well as an emotion or a feeling. And so I got to look at these beliefs I had about myself and realize that I had a twisted belief based on a story I made up. It had nothing to do with my sisters, nothing to do with my circumstances, nothing to do with where I grew up. It had to do with how I was seeing Ralph Campbell. And until I got to that point, my narrative was pretty predictable. I was going to go down this path. And in that workshop over those 3 days, I had an opportunity to stop, look, re-examine myself, create new belief systems, and then begin to take action and live out of this new way of being. Not to say life was going to be great, because life is what you make of it. Right. But coming from the being context, I was able to reimagine who I was. And it wasn't that I was less than, it was that I'm whole, complete, and there's work to be done. It's about swinging that bat every day.
Right, right, absolutely. Now, there are lots and lots of transformational programs out there, and I've done a large majority of them. I'm talking about LifeSpring specifically because it was the program that, shall I say, woke me up, for lack of a better term. So using that as a springboard here, as we're talking, when you did your LifeSpring training, coming out of that basic training, if you could sum what you learned in one word from that initial LifeSpring training, what word do you think you would use to describe what you got out of it?
I'm going to say a phrase, Michael, if you pardon me here, a phrase. And the phrase is the detachment of my predispositions so I can let go and see differently. The detachment of my predispositions, my historical assumptions, my historical beliefs that I didn't know I had, childhood, adolescence, puberty, to detach from them, create new ones in order to see differently. So that's the training. The training's an opportunity to detach from stuff we've made up, create new empowering ones, right? Hence empowering Black men. And then out of me creating new ones, I'm able to see differently. So detaching from historical assumptions in order to see differently.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. That kind of sums it up, actually. Now, for me, it's interesting because if I were to sum it up in one word, that one word would be commitment. What I learned during this process was that if I was committed to something, there was no one or no thing that could keep me from accomplishing that commitment, whatever it was. And it literally changed everything for me, because I had always had these big dreams and goals, and I've always been motivated and somewhat successful, but there was something ingraining in my own being, the power I had when I committed to something. And so when I left that training, and like I said, I went home, I processed a lot, and then I went to my job that I've been with for like 10 years. And I made a lot of mistakes, but there was something in me that said, I'm committed to having this happen. And no matter what it takes, I'm going to make it happen. And that's been my driving force. So it's one of the most powerful lessons that I got out of it. Because as mentioned, it was the first experience I had with dealing with my beingness and, the jargon and the words we use, but that word commitment, it became more than a word. It became a feeling. It became an experience for me. Commitment. Oh, there's so much power in that. Now, when I did my basic training, I was the only man of color in the room, which has never been an issue for me. But I know there are some men who may be watching this that may be a little uncomfortable with the thought of maybe being in a room where they're the only man of color. So from your perspective, was that an issue or a hindrance to you fully participating? Or what was the racial mix of your initial training?
Well, Michael, going back 25 years, I was just like you. I was probably the only Black male out of maybe 2 or 3 African Americans or Blacks out of a room of about 200.
Wow.
But to me, I was used to that makeup, given I grew up in Key West, very Hispanic, white. So I was always in high school, in early corporate America. That wasn't odd to me. So I was able to not really react negatively to that. But what I realized by going through the training is that it kept my armor up, because seeing myself as separate, not as one, which I discovered in the training, we're one, I kept my armor up for the first 2 days. And that's an assumption that I didn't know I had, that I had me being the minority, literally, as just being separate. So I didn't share. I didn't open up. People couldn't get close to me. And that's a stigma for a lot of Black men, that they actually, if you hear about the stereotypes, that's one of them, that we hold stuff in, we suppress, we bottle like the truth, right? And that's not all Black men. However, that's a definitely behavior. That's a trait that a lot of Black men would say, yes, I can identify with that trait. And a lot of that comes out of, for me, being the only one where I didn't have a tribe, or now the word is a squad, right, in politics. I didn't have a group of people that I felt I can connect with. Again, a made up assumption, right, Michael? A made up belief. It wasn't the truth. We're the same species, Homo sapiens, but I had it as I am separate, I am different. And so I was confronting that, not knowing. I was confronting that I walked in thinking I was separate. I walked out believing that I'm one.
Yeah, and again, I think there's this belief that as men of color, that we somehow are denying our ethnicity when we say I'm a human being versus saying I'm a black man. It's like, I know I get a lot of pushback from black men at times when I say that I'm a human being. Oh, you're not a black man? What's the matter? You know, it's like I'm denying, but in reality, I'm not denying my ethnicity. I'm affirming my humanity. And transformation is about our humanness. It's about our inner essence. So it has nothing to do with the color of our skin. And that's what I'm trying to do with this show. Empower men of color to recognize this, and that we can transform our lives when we commit to doing so. It's absolutely possible. So Ralph, I want you to kind of try to think about this. There was Ralph before the training, and now there's Ralph after the training. How are they different? And you touched upon it a little, but kind of unpack that a little bit.
Well, there was Ralph before the training, skeptical, and you can probably relate to this, skeptical, chip on the shoulder, often called the angry black male, right? More stereotypes, very positioned, very victim-y. They were doing this to me. I've been, I'm always the minority in whatever setting I was in. And at that time I was in corporate America. So I was a victim of everything. And I had a lot of evidence, Michael, right? It's confirmation bias in psychology. I had a lot of evidence to prove it, but that was just my own stuff. And then as I went through the workshop and broke through, it was letting go of this armor that the world was against me, that I didn't have a voice, letting go that I didn't matter, letting go that I got dealt a bad deck. And we're the only species, okay? We're Homo sapiens, our species, the only species, Michael, that can reinterpret and reimagine the future. There's no other species walking around, Michael, that can reinterpret an idea and make new meaning of it in the next minute, next second. And your audience needs to get that, because that's special. And when you get that, then you have choice. And when I got that I can reimagine, and that we're the only species that actually can reinterpret a whole new possibility, well, guess what? The doors I had closed begin to open up. And back to what you said about some black men do the pushback. And there's a history as to my belief as to why that happens, because most ethnic groups, all of them, you don't come to a Mexican and say you're Hispanic, or you go to South America and talk about, oh, you're Latino, Latinx. They're going to tell you, no, I'm from Ecuador. I'm from Bogota, Colombia, or I'm from Mexico. With African Americans, without having this grounded identity, because of, as we know, the transatlantic slave trade, we didn't have a nation to hold on to. Everyone else goes to the Olympics wearing their flags, right? I mean, it's proud to be Nicaraguan. It's proud to be from Bolivia. And so I think a lot of that comes out of, hey, we didn't have a nation to cling to. Now, doesn't put you all, you own that, awesome. Yes, African-American, love it, great. And we're all, like you said, we're all part of the human species. So I just wanted to speak into that as well.
Yeah, very powerful, very powerful. Now, for me, it's interesting because what I discovered as a result of the training was that I went in and I had this mask called Mr. Nice Guy, Everything's Okay, that I hid behind. And I had this insatiable need to people please, to get people to like me. And so I created this success as a way of getting people to like me. And when I went through the training, I went, whoa, wait a minute. I don't have to do anything to be loved, to be liked. I can just be me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to have a title. I don't have to have money. I don't have to have a position. I just need to be happy with myself. And it was a big aha moment for me that, once again, began my journey of transformation. And one of the things, or some of the things other things that I learned during the training was just how disconnected I was from my feelings, from my emotions. So I'm wondering, in your experience, when you did the trainings, obviously emotions come up. Did it help you or help you identify feelings maybe that you haven't really discovered before?
Yeah, that as I look back, as Steve Jobs says, you only connect the dots looking backwards. I was very much like you. I hadn't cried in years because I was taught, again, historical assumptions that black men or men in general, right? That's a bigger stereotype, but now we're talking black males. You don't cry, you hold your emotions in. And so that's what I did. I thought that was normal. And so as I went through the processes and I saw men and women being vulnerable, that was, I didn't have a concept for that, Michael. Didn't have a concept until Sunday of my graduation when my mother came and opened my eyes. I don't want to give the training away. And something touched me of who I was, my emotions. I don't know where they came from. And that was the beginning of having vulnerability be courageous and be powerful versus what I had made up based on what I learned as a child in this society for men, for black males. And I was able to make up a new interpretation that vulnerability is power, is about exposing yourself from whatever's out there and be willing to, as Brene Brown says, be in the arena, right? Open yourself up. That's where the power really lies. And that was the beginning of the peeling off of the armor, was really accessing my vulnerability, which began me on that journey. Still today, I still take that on as a core concept of when I'm really creating magic, Michael, I'm being vulnerable to the world. And vulnerability isn't just shedding tears. It could be. Vulnerability really is the emotion we experience when we feel uncertain, at risk, or emotionally exposed, right? Being, taking off that armor. For black men, that's very, very risky. Or for men in general, it's very, very risky because we have this whole thing about being right, as you know, looking good, staying in control, which is the opposite of being vulnerable. Being vulnerable is about, we don't care about looking good, about being right, about being in control. We're just exposing ourselves. As Brene Brown says, hey, be in the arena versus being in the cheap seats where we can criticize and judge. And we do the Facebook where, as we talk about the cesspool of humanity sometimes, negativity. And so that was the beginning for me to begin to pull that armor off. And I continue to do that, right?
Yeah,
Continue.
absolutely. Now, with that being said, so how did that impact your intimate relationships?
It opened this whole new door for relationships. I really wasn't in a significant relationship. They were saying they wanted me to be. I didn't know what being was.
Yeah.
Being to me was just being hard, right? or having an armor. Let's just say being hard is a big word. A lot of people. So having an armor on, and so slowly I began to trust myself and get that I'm worthy of connecting with an intimate partner. It really opened the door to relationships personally as well as professionally. Because at the end of the day, we all want to be related to. We all want to love and to be loved.
Right.
At the end of the day, right? We're a social species, Michael. The science is overwhelming. This is not a debate. We're a social species, and social species, by nature, desire, need connection in order to exist, or we'll get selected out, right? Or we'll get selected out, and we see that, which is why the training is so powerful, and connecting with human beings in life is very, very powerful, because that's where we are at the core.
Yeah, and so for me, after my divorce, obviously I had up these emotional walls, and at the time, I didn't realize I had these walls up, but I noticed a pattern, and the pattern was I would date someone, and the relationship would usually last 3 to 4 weeks max. Then the women would say, I care too much about you to stay in this relationship. Now, how much sense does that make, right? It's like, wait, you care about me, but you're leaving me? I don't understand this. Well, what they all said was, I wasn't emotionally available.
Mm.
And so, again, my mask was, I was this really nice guy And I gave, but I didn't allow women to give to me. I didn't know how to open my heart and to be vulnerable to them. I knew how to take care of them, but I didn't know how to allow them to take care of me. And that was a huge light bulb moment. It's like, oh, that's the problem. And so I had to be willing to do some inner work. And again, it was more than just this 3-day life spring thing. It was really some healing, some emotional trauma stuff. And so it's a process. But the point I want to make is for men of color is that we seldom talk about things like vulnerability and our emotional capacity. And that's where the magic is. And so we've got to be willing to stop looking out there and look in here and in here if we truly want to transform our lives. So Ralph, from a professional point of view, in your professional life, how did that training help you in your professional life?
Yeah, in a professional life, it allowed me to learn how to see differently. And I'm gonna give you your viewers 4 skills that I use every day as a result of the trainings that have helped me build 3 different separate companies and do some of the things that I'm doing now in the community and what have you, in the relationships. First is understanding how to see differently. And there's 4 steps of how to see differently that I use in my professional career, since that's the question. The first skill of seeing differently is that we get to embrace and embody that everything we do is grounded in our assumptions, not sometimes, but all the time. These assumptions are there from birth. They're already there, Michael, and they're always there. The second skill, once we believe and embrace that, is to develop what I call assumptive intelligence. Assumptive intelligence is the idea that you and I have the ability to uncover or rediscover our assumptions that inhibit us. Become aware of the beliefs we've made up, these assumptions that limit us. So first, get that we are grounded in assumptions. 2, begin to develop assumptive intelligence to become aware of some of the beliefs that limit us. 3, take those beliefs and frame them as questions. Questions are very powerful, Michael. They open up a lot of possibility. Frame them as questions. And I call them the why questions, the what if. So now we have what are the possible solutions to look at it differently? And then the how, which is the action, committed action, the execution. And then the 4th skill is taking those questions and challenging those assumptions. Test it out. Because a lot of our assumptions, we don't test, we don't challenge, which is why we can't see differently. What we're seeing is what I learned 30 or 40 years ago. And that's awesome if it works. As we know, Michael, we keep evolving. The iPhone 11 has just come out. We keep evolving in the banking system, the educational system, the financial system, cars, we're going to Mars. But the one thing we haven't evolved yet, is evolving our assumptions. We're still living out of assumptions when we were 10, 11, 12 years old. But we're driving new cars. We're flying around the world. We have new inventions, Twitter and Facebook and Snap. But we're still on an old assumption that we had when we were 10 years old. That doesn't make any sense. But people haven't been trained on how to see differently. We've been trained how to build a new phone. We've been trained on how to do new technology and new clothes and new glasses. But we haven't been trained on how to see differently. And the big thing about seeing differently is get that we're made up of assumptions and have the courage to challenge and have a process of how do you challenge your assumptions. It's not about being right, it's about getting it right.
Yeah.
And a lot of our young people and Black males were not taught that. So guess what? I'm just going to hold on. I'm going to attach to what I know when I was 14, 15, and I'm going to live out of it. I'm no good. I'm separate. I'm unavailable emotionally. I'm not going to be vulnerable. And that's the only way I can see from those lenses. And if that works with you, Michael, I'm going to be in a relationship. Yay. And it worked for me up until I was 25. And then I was on probation at work. Because guess what? I was in a profession where I had to connect with people. And I was shut down. I was closed. So the 15% that loved this way of being, it worked. but I was missing the 85. It wasn't available to me until I began to challenge my fundamental assumptions of who I was being. And
Yeah.
it wasn't easy. And that's the process, those 4 skills.
Yeah. Now, great tip. Now, in this transformational process, organizations like LifeSpring and other programs use what's called experiential learning. Break that down just a little bit for the viewers, the distinction between experiential learning and just book learning.
Yeah. In the trainings, we call it didactic learning, right? So we have didactic learning where regurgitation, you go to school, college, you memorize information, binge and purge. I'm sure people that are listening, you go to college and you're cramming on a Thursday and a test on a Friday. Your mother asks you what you learned on a Saturday, you forget it. That's called didactic learning. And we also call it the forgetting curve. The neuroscience, the science tells us that after 30 days, we're going to forget most of what we learned. Okay, that's not disputable. There's billions of papers or millions of papers written about. It's called the natural forgetting curve, and that's called didactic learning. Short-term learning, we're going to forget most of it unless we do it every day. The trainings, they've been around 50 years, and why they're so powerful, because it's experiential learning, which is distinct from book learning or didactic learning. And experiential learning is the opportunity that we have to experience our own learning, be in discovery. And it's rooted in really neuroscience. The brain learns through pattern recognition. It learns through building neural patterns. Michael, this is all out there for people to don't believe what I say. Please look into what I say. To understand human being, you have to understand what goes on in here. We have 86 billion neurons, and they're always communicating, and they're building pathways. You go to the bathroom, you drink water, everything you do habitually builds a pattern. And the awesome thing about that is understanding how the brain works gives you the ability to build a pathway. And so in the trainings, you get that opportunity through experiential, participating in your own learning. Your brain is building a deeper pathway where you can recall that information and use it in the future. With didactic learning, your brain can't hold on to it. It doesn't build a pathway. So that's why after about 30 days, unless you're shooting the basketball over and over again, most of human beings will forget. With experiential, you're participating in your own learning. You're in discovery nonstop. So from a neurological standpoint, you're building a deeper pathway, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You're building and your brain can recall it in the future. Still takes work, still takes committed action, still takes like either swinging the bat or dribbling the ball or whatever analogy you want to use in regards to putting the work in. But that's actually what's happening. Experiential learning is the most powerful type of learning, which is why kids and adults love sports. Sports would be an example of experiential learning because you're participating, you're on the field, you're not in the classroom. In the classroom, a lot of it is didactic learning. You're just doing the lecturette. You're just listening, taking in information, and then maybe recalling it, usually in a test.
Yeah. Yeah, and another way to look at it is if you had never ridden a bicycle and I gave you a book and I want you to read that and study that book on how to ride that bicycle, after you memorize that book, would you be able to ride the bike? No. Mm-hmm. You won't learn how to ride the bike until you ride the bike. You've got to experience the bike. And so that's the power of experiential learning. It's something that gets in your being, as we were saying at the beginning. So that's the transformational part. Now, talking about transformation, I want to have an enrollment conversation right now, Ralph. Well, an enrollment conversation. So the people who are watching this right now and they're thinking, man, I don't know about this personal growth stuff, this transformation. Why do I want to do that? So I want you to have an enrollment call. Why should someone want to invest in their personal growth and development?
Yeah. In order to even want to invest, you have to get clear on what matters to you. You have to have some type of cause, some purpose, something that's calling you forth. See, without that, then I would say there's no need. Go to your bubble, get in a fetal position, Michael, and watch Netflix all day. The training's for people that have their lives working and they want to figure out what's in the way to get to the next level. So personal development is for people that are already playing a big game, or they want to step up to the plate. They have courage, they have vulnerability, that they're ready to step up to the plate and take a look at themselves and examine themselves. And then from there, personal development, as I call it, transformation, where you're altering who you're being, right, is the most powerful place. But first, people have to really begin with what's your why? You know, why does it matter? What's working in your life right now that you want to take to the next level? What's maybe off, maybe health-wise, financial-wise, relationship-wise, education-wise? Take a look at yourself and identify some parts that you want to take to the next level, because the trainings go on the premise that your life is already working. It's all relative. It's where do you want to go now? And are you willing to do some work to take a look at some of the assumptions you've made up that limit you? Given we know what I talk about, skill number one, you know, getting that everything I do is built on assumptions. So now, hey, I want to grow. First, I got to figure out what's holding me back.
Yeah.
And that's the opportunity for personal development. But it's not for everyone, Michael. This isn't just about, hey, go sign up for LifeSpring and go change the world. It's for men that are courageous enough, and they have a big why, a big purpose in front of them. Maybe it's your children. Maybe it's your church. Maybe it's your neighborhood, your community. What's the calling for you that would want you to grow?
Yeah. And so the challenge is for us to, and again, this isn't for everyone. As a matter of fact, very few people actually engage in this process. For those of you who are watching this, I'm going to make an assumption. And that assumption is that you're committed to living an extraordinary life. And if you're committed to living an extraordinary life, then here's an opportunity for you to step into that and to gain some tools to be able to do so. So we all have our considerations and excuses. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. Black people don't do that. Why are you hanging out with the white people? There's all sorts of excuses we can make. So what would you say to that person that's making up all these considerations about why they shouldn't engage in transformation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it goes back to what I said earlier. You know, something has to be bigger than your considerations. Something. You've got to choose for yourself. And it doesn't have to be the 13, 14, 15 things. Pick one thing. We call it the 1%. What's the one thing that if you took it on and you grew would exponentially affect other areas of your life? And it comes back to figuring out what that is for you and going through the process. I walked in not knowing, but I walked in going, I'm trusting the person that enrolled me that my life can be better than it was today. And I had a safe environment to explore. I didn't necessarily knew I was going to grab a hold of it, and I didn't. But guess what? It opened that door, as you talked about earlier, it being this journey you've been on. Well, guess what, Michael? I've been on the journey for 25 years. It never stops. And I've had 3 businesses, 2 twin boys, coaching thousands and thousands of people, leading workshops with some of the biggest corporations in the world, Neiman Marcus, a lot of different organizations here in Florida is where I'm located. And I wouldn't be in this position if I didn't uncover some of these assumptions that were limiting me and begin to open my heart on the power that I am for other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what I want for you, the audience, is first of all, to know that it's possible. It's possible for you to live an extraordinary life. I am absolutely convinced that you have everything you need already within you to create the life of your dreams. I'm living proof of that. But you're going to have to take some risk. You're going to have to take some risk. And this, again, I'm using LifeSpring as a basis for this conversation because it was my beginning for transformational work. But again, there's all sorts of organizations out there that you can become involved with that can support and empower you. There are specific organizations specifically for men of color. There's no shortage of opportunities for you to transform your life. You simply have to commit that that's something you want to do. So Ralph, I want to give you an opportunity now. You have Learning Optimized as an organization. So tell us a little bit about that organization and tell people how they can find you if they're interested in working with you or having you come speak or whatever.
Yeah, well, thank you, Michael, for having me. Learning Optimize really is accumulation of all of my interests. And so I'm a performance and a learning consultant. And so I work with people who want to elevate how they perform. And I work with people answering the following question: why do people do what they do? Why do people do what they do? And our methodology, I call it the Learning Optimized Framework. And so I work with people answering the question: why do people do what they do? And the reason people do what they do, Michael, is because how we perform is correlated with how we interpret the world. And then how we interpret the world shows up in our language, verbal and nonverbal. And if you want to have a different future, you get to learn how to alter your language, verbal and nonverbal. And that's why I call myself a performance consultant, because I work with people that are athletes, that are educators, that are entrepreneurs. It's answering that same question and understanding why we do what you do. We focus on mindsets. We focus on what I call personality intelligence, understanding your various personality styles, and also emotional intelligence. And those are my three critical areas: emotional intelligence, personality intelligence, and then mindsets, right? Open mindset, closed mindset, growth mindset, fixed mindset. And again, all of those are in the being space, right? Personalities in the being space, emotions in the being space, mindsets in the being space. You notice right back to the ontological we talked about. Being produces the doing, produces what we have. I call it be, do, have. It's one of our frameworks. Who I get to be, then I take action consistent with who I'm being, and then I produce the results of my life. Maybe weight loss, financial security, houses, businesses, what have you. And so that's what I do. On the learning piece, Learning Optimized, we support people retaining information so they can use it in the future. Remember I said earlier, this forgetting curve, we all forget relatively quickly. Well, I've worked with a gentleman out of Harvard, a company out of Harvard, where I have a learning platform that I use in educational high schools, middle schools, and with corporations, where when I do my coaching on those three specialties, I support them through a digital platform, reinforcing the learning. And it's based in neuroscience on how our brains work. Remember we talked about pathways? A little technical, I don't want to get into that, but I'm excited to have those pieces. You're out practicing in the world, you're out experiencing, like LifeSpring, the experiential, and then having that tool to go to get feedback and help you encode those new beliefs, right? Those new assumptions you're making. How do I hold on to that, Michael? I'm out in the world by myself. I don't have a Michael every day listening to your show. I don't have a Ralph. And so I provide tools because I want people to fire me. I want people to have the tools, Michael, to go live an extraordinary life, right? I don't need you. You don't need me. If I can give my gift and provide you some stabilization, some new tools, new ways to look at the world, guess what? My kids have a future, and your kids have a future.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, boy, time flies when you're having fun. So I want to give you an opportunity to share your website or how people can contact you if they're interested.
Yeah, my website is learningoptimize.com. Learningoptimize.com. You can Google me, look me up. Love to share my story, ways that I can support you. I'm a connector, so I believe in community. If there's something that you're struggling with and I don't have the answer for you, I'm sure I can support you. And the one thing I'd leave with your viewers is that you are the best version of you. There's a lot of good, solid trainings out there. I'm biased. LifeSpring changed my life. And that's just one vehicle. Find the vehicle for you. Find your tribe, find your community, and take action.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ralph, I just want to say thank you, man, for sharing your wisdom with us today. I ran across you on Facebook, on the LifeSpring page on Facebook, and I said, man, I got to get this brother on my show. So again, I just want to say thanks for sharing your wisdom and being the amazing human being that you are.
And I want to acknowledge you, Michael, for having the courage to talk about some of these issues. And this is one of the first shows I've seen that you're really specifically addressing what you're talking, these stereotypes in regards to Black males. It takes a lot of courage. And so I want to acknowledge you for your passion, your vulnerability, your clarity of purpose, because it makes a big difference.
Absolutely. And when it's all said and done, stereotypes are just beliefs. We're just transforming those beliefs. So again, thank you, man, for everything you're doing in the world. And I know that everything happens for a reason, and we've been brought together for a divine purpose, and I know our paths will cross again.
Thank you, Michael.
All right. So this has been another episode of Shatter the Stereotypes. And my hope for you is simple. I want you to live an extraordinary life. But I can't do it for you. You got to do it for yourself. So go out there and make it happen. Take care, and we'll see you next episode. Goodbye.